Hello, my name is Emma. I'm a practicing Catholic and I'm also going to a different house of worship every week. This week is really exciting because it's our first non-Christian service. I'm going to Yom Kippur service with my friend. Hence, I heard that everyone wears white, so I'm wearing a white outfit. And it's really exciting. So we're going to a place called Wise Temple, which I believe is the birthplace of Reform Judaism in America. So it's going to be really cool to see it like at this really historic place. So I will check in with you afterwards.
It is the day after Yom Kippur, and I am in a much better mood now because I'm not hungry. So let's chat about it. So I will say first off is that I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was beautiful, and I will talk about kind of my first impressions of it, walk you through the service, walk you through my takeaways. I have my notes next to you, so if I'm looking back and forth, that's why. So I will start off by saying I did choose to fast. For this holiday, and I know that I didn't have to, but I wanted to get the full experience of what it was like to be able to appreciate it as much as I could. And initially I was feeling a little bit nervous because it is a really important day, and I didn't want it to feel like I was intruding on something. I mean, when you look at me, like, it's pretty clear that I'm not Jewish, so I wanted to be like as respectful as possible. I was looking up like what to wear. I was like, no jewelry, no leather shoes, like all that kind of thing, just to be as respectful as I could. But walking in, everyone was just so warm and welcome, and people were wearing all different things, and I felt like it was a place where you could come and be met kind of where you are and be accepted however you chose to practice. And I thought that was really beautiful. The service started, it was out of a hardcover book that said Yom Kippur. So my understanding is that there were multiple versions of this service that could be done, and we participated in one of them. And what was really nice is that it had the Hebrew prayers and songs, as well as all the English translations. And what I thought was really interesting about this service is that there were reflections from rabbis as well as other religious leaders. So, for example, we reflected on the seven social sins that Gandhi presented. And I thought this was really interesting because I think in a lot of Christian spaces, you have reflections, but they're not normally an established part of a service. They might be something that someone references or even something that is part of a talk or a discussion outside of the service. But I did really like how these ones were woven into the service itself. Another aspect of the service that I thought was really interesting were the areas for individual reflection. I think often in Christian services, the pastor, whoever's leading, might ask a question, we think about it for a couple seconds, and we come back together. But here, there were entire pages of this book that we were told read page like 308 and 309, and then we'll come back. And I thought it was really nice to be able to read things at my own speed, but it was also just something that I had never experienced before. In terms of the music, it was a cantor, a choir, and an organ. The organ seemed totally normal to me coming from the Catholic Church, but apparently this is more rare in Jewish settings. I had also been warned to wear comfortable shoes because there's going to be a lot of sitting and standing. But again, coming from a Catholic background, it seemed pretty normal to me. Like I was used to like doing those squats on the chair, so I felt fine. It felt normal to me. So I think part of what I think is really beautiful about the Catholic Church that was also echoed in this was the history and the legacy behind a lot of the prayers. And you could tell that some of these chants, some of these prayers, people knew they had been saying their whole lives, but also were really historic. And I think that's just beautiful to be able to participate in something that has been part of your heritage and part of your cultures for so many centuries. I would say the last major aspect of the service that really stood out to me was the Torah itself. I had seen it over, I believe it's called the Ark. There were a few of them. I will say I was surprised at how little I knew. The way that I was told about the Torah is that it's kind of like the Jewish loose equivalent of the first five books of our Old Testament, which is, I believe, called the Pentateuch. And that was kind of all I knew. And so I was like, oh, well, a lot of families have Bibles at home. Do families have Torahs at home? The answer was no. I later learned that apparently there's something called the Tanakh, and it's a bound book, the Hebrew Bible, and that has aspects of the Torah as well as prophets and writings. So these are a lot of other books that we would associate with the Old Testament in the Christian tradition. But I have no idea why I thought it was literally just those first five books. But I think this makes sense if, for example, we have the Psalms that we believe were sung by the Israelites that Jewish people of today would also have the Psalms. And this clicked for me and caused me to do some digging when we referenced a verse from Song of Songs, which is my favorite book of the Bible, but also is clearly not part of the Pentateuch. And so I think that just made me really excited that there's so many more common aspects than I realized, that we share so many more stories and lessons that I had previously known. But also, I'm like, how did I grow up 23 years and not know that the Torah was not equivalent to the Hebrew Bible? Like, that seems like a pretty big thing. Anyway, another thing that stood out to me about the Torahs was, I mean, clearly, like, we have a few Bibles that are really important, like the Gutenberg Bibles. But for most people, like their family Bible or even the Bible at their church I don't know, maybe 20 years old. And it really is a book, but I didn't realize that the specific physical Torahs have so much importance, and that a lot of them are decades, if not centuries old. And a lot of them were also salvaged from Europe. And I think, like, I had no idea the significance of the physical Torah itself. And I think it shows like history and the tradition and like the enduring aspects of this religion, and it became so much more tangible to me about the importance of them. The sermon was pretty short. It was at the end of the service. It was led by the senior rabbi. These were his last high holy days with his congregation, and you could tell just how much love he had for his work and for his congregation. And he was very inspiring. He was talking about, like, clearly it's a really heavy day in general, but also a very heavy time. But he was so full of hope and so full of love and pride. I found it really inspiring, even as someone who wasn't really involved with what he was saying. Some takeaways were the idea of atonement is very different in Judaism and Christianity. So part of the reflections during the service were reading through a list of, have you done this? Have you considered this? And a lot of these mirrored a Catholic examination of conscience, but actually how you ask for forgiveness is super different. So Christians will confess to God, sometimes by yourself, sometimes with the help of a priest, depending on your denomination. And it's encouraged to like make amends with the people who you may have hurt, but it's kind of ad hoc and not really like enforced in any way. In Judaism, my understanding is that a lot of this happens during these 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and people will reach out and apologize to people and really start off this new year all at once. And I think it's both beautiful, and I think there is a lot to be said about encouraging everyone at once to really heal together and start off new together, but it was just something that I hadn't really considered before. Another thing that I noticed was that there's a lot of different ways to practice Judaism. I mean, clearly, like, there are different types of synagogues, but even between that, I think that in Christianity, it's pretty common for people to think that their way of practicing is, one, the only right way, and two, should be the way that other people practice. But here it felt very accepting, and that there were a lot of different ways to live a good, full Jewish life. The last major takeaway I have is this value of community, and you can see that with people walking into the temple. People clearly just had known each other for years, truly loved each other. And looking at the reflection questions, an entire section was, how have you contributed to living a good Jewish life? Have you learned about your history? Have you helped your community? Have you raised your family Jewish? And I think that this is encouraged in Christianity to support our communities, but I had never seen it stated at such a high level and seen such a commitment to this. And I thought that part especially was really beautiful. And in terms of fasting, I know that I didn't need to do that, but it gave me so much respect to people who do this, and it also gave me a window into the commitment to living out your beliefs and your traditions, that you're willing to like not put anything in your mouth for an entire day. So overall, I thought that this was super, super beautiful. Like, the biggest thing that stood out to me were pride in someone's culture, in their community, in their heritage. And that's something that definitely could be admired, whether you're Jewish or clearly if you're not Jewish like me. So I just really appreciate people welcoming me into their space and allowing me to share in this day with them.